The next bowler that we sort of want to cover in the sort of list of uncapped is actually a very different sort of bowler from Arshdeep Singh. When all the sort of attributes that you can sort of point to Arshdeep Singh, it's almost like the absolute opposite. But the beauty of the IPL is that you can see different, and cricket in general, as a matter of fact, is that you can see different sorts of players having different sorts of paths to success. And somebody who's certainly been successful this season is Umran Malik. So Umran has been an interesting find. He's not new to this season, right? We saw him for a couple of games in the last IPL, and then he was sort of picked by SRH. A lot of people sort of mocked that decision. They letting Rashid Khan go and having Umran Malik in. There's a lot of memes and those sorts of things that were said about it. But he sort of repaid their faith in many ways in this IPL season. And Gurkirat, one of the things I wanted to ask you is, apart from the obvious elephant in the room, pace, what have been some of the things that have interested you about Umran this season?
See, people, there's a criticism about him that he doesn't have control, etc. See, my only point is that pace is something that you can't teach. As the tournament went along, you saw that his control was improving. And the one thing that I'd like to give credit SRH for is that they also used him well. They bowled him in the power play in the very first game, and they realized that he was taken for runs by Jos Buttler, even though he dismissed him later on, that he's not someone who you could particularly bank upon in the power play or at the death. So they used him particularly as a middle overs enforcer. And it's one thing to have pace, but the other thing was that he kept brushing the batters even when the batters know what was coming at them. And the best part that I liked about his pace was that there was no letting off, there was no let up. Even in his fourth over, you could see like when he bowled 157, it was in the last over of the game. It was his fourth over, so it was not as if his effort was going down.
And the ball before that, to your point, right? The ball before that was also in the 150s, right? So in that over, consistently he was clocking 150. So it wasn't just an anomaly.
Exactly. And the other thing that I want to get at is that at no point you felt that he was pushing the barrier too much, that he would break down or injure himself. Because sometimes when bowlers bowl the extra effort ball, they let out a grunt or something. You hardly saw that with Imran. And the other thing which makes me feel excited about him, or about retaining that pace, is that his actions are quite smooth one. You look at his action, you don't feel that he's about to break a muscle. Sometimes if you watch Jasprit Bumrah bowl closely, or if you watch Jasprit Bumrah bowl from the stadium, you realize the effort that goes into his front leg, or the elbow, and he has those special twitch fibers which allow him to generate that pace. But with Umran, because his action is so smooth, you don't feel that. It's something that I've also felt with someone like Kagiso Rabada. His actions very, very smooth. So that makes me very optimistic about Umran in the future. And something about his economy rates. People mentioned that he was being expensive, but his economy rate in the middle overs was pretty much similar to Kuldeep Yadav. Now, I know some would say that you can't compare a pace bowler to a spinner. I agree, but what I'm trying to get at is Kuldeep Yadav's been an India international for 5 years now. Umran Malik is in his first full IPL season, and I think controlling 150 or 145 plus deliveries is far tougher than controlling wrist spin at 85 or 90 kilometers per hour. Some people might disagree, but I'm just trying to make a point here that you have to be patient with him, because it's not that he only went for runs. He did break a few games, he did pick up wickets, and I think
there was that fifer that he took against Gujarat, for reference, right, where he even though SRH lost that game, the reason why they were at a point where it became a last ball finish was because Umran kept on hitting stumps of batsmen who couldn't play him.
They had no business. SRH had no business losing that game if they'd not bowled as poorly as they did in the last 2 overs. So what I'm trying to get at is that Umran's probably only going to get better because he's going to learn how to move the ball, because he doesn't move the ball that much. He does bowl the occasional outswinger, but doesn't bring the ball back in that much. He'll also learn how to use angles, and the best part is that when he will learn how to bowl the slower one and at what points to bowl the slower one, his slower one will have far greater effect than the slower ones which others bowl, because as a batter you would be so much conditioned through your muscle memory and your instincts to react probably a second or two faster, that when that slower ball comes you would be so much through your shot that it would leave you very little time to adjust. And something that I want to add on the pace front, because we need to put this in numbers, I feel. The difference between 145 and 155 might only seem 10 kilometers per hour, but when you break it down to meter per second, it's a difference of 2.7 meter per second. And
reaction time is very low.
It's 2.7 meter per second, and the pitch is only 22 yards, which I suppose comes out to around, I'm not sure how much. I think it's around 0.2 meters. I'm not sure. I think 22 yards is around 0.2 meters. So a speed of 2.7 meter per second through a distance of 0.2 meters could probably make a difference if the ball doesn't slow down, which it does.
Yeah.
If the speed remains constant, it makes a difference of about 10 seconds. Now, obviously, the ball slows down. It loses space when it hits the wicket. But even then, it would probably make a difference of about 4 to 5 seconds, if not more, or probably even 3 seconds. And I just want to quote Virat Kohli here. He said that Rohit Sharma he doesn't have an extra second. He has extra 1.5 second in Breakfast with Champions, when he was talking to Gaurav Kapoor about how Rohit Sharma has that gift of timing.
Yeah.
Now, batting is particularly a very instinctive thing. You see the ball and you react to it. Especially when you are batting well. If you're not batting well, you're thinking about so many things, that where's my head going, where my feet's going, how's my bat swing coming about. But when you're batting well, it's purely about instincts. You see the ball and then you react through your muscle memory. Now, just imagine how much of a difference would reacting 3 seconds earlier would make when you're facing Umran. So he's someone that has a very high potential, just needs to be guided in the perfect manner, and he could be very, very lethal.
And to that point, the team that he has at SRH, right, is a pretty good one to learn with, right? Dale Steyn is a pretty good person to learn fast bowling from. But no, it's interesting you bring that up. And you mentioned his action being one that is very smooth, refined, and repeatable. I do see there are certain stress points and strain points in it. And what it really reminds me of, as a sort of a cricket fan who is well inundated with the 90s, it's very strikingly similar, his action, to a really great bowler, Waqar Younis, when he first came out of the scene. A lot of people see Waqar clips after he had a second back injury in 1995. He wasn't as fast, or after his first back injury where he made modifications. The very first action he came out was a little bit more high-armed, like Umran, still relatively round-armish. And like Waqar, I'd see that being very useful, right? The remarkable thing about Umran is, because he's a T20 player and he's mainly been doing this, right? He hasn't really played an FC match or so forth. He hasn't had a chance to reverse the ball. But I could see him developing the skill set, and with his action,
he's played three first class games. He hasn't played a Ranji Trophy game, but he was on the India A tour to South Africa A. And coming to Waqar, you are talking to someone who started watching cricket after 2003, when Waqar had almost all but retired. So it's something that only you can stress upon. I haven't seen enough of him to make a comparison.
Right. But I mean, just as someone who's watched him, the resemblance very striking. Waqar might have been slightly quicker. But the point being, your point about the slow ball is very well warranted. Because like I know Wakar used to get Sanat Jayasuriya, who was a great opener for Sri Lanka, used to get him out a lot of the times with a slower ball sometimes as well, like some of those variations, and it was very effective against him. And similarly, there are parts of Umran's action, again with that sort of round arm angle and with that high pace that we're talking about, that are actually similar to even Shoaib Akhtar. And if you remember, in 2005, 2006, when the England side that had just won the Ashes, so ranked number one really in the world, toured Pakistan, they got wrecked. And a huge reason that they got wrecked was because those slower balls that Shoaib kept on bowling, because they'd been the batsmen's been so comfortable playing that particular pace, when they actually saw a slower ball, a lot of times they would just appear like a full toss and it would dip, and they would have no answer, right? So I think his action is very good. Because it's a lower arm release angle, one of the advantages is that he can hit the stumps a lot more. Like even when he's bowling just short of a length, it won't often climb as much as, say, somebody with a high arm action. And that can be useful in the shorter formats at high pace when you're trying to hit the stumps and so forth, or bowl Yorkers and so forth. And I know he's raw, right? But there is a sort of innate game awareness in him that is also interesting to look at. So I bring up the example of KKR. Now KKR throughout this IPL tournament have struggled with the short ball, and central to those struggles has been someone who's been the captain, Shreyas Iyer. So I remember this over that he was bowling to Shreyas in the KKR game, right, where he actually bowled a couple of bounces and made him hop, and he was trying to back away and hit because he was struggling to time the ball, and Shreyas has this weakness against the short ball. It's known for a while. And then he followed it up after 3 balls in that over or something with a pinpoint Yorker around off and middle and hit the base of the stumps, and Shreyas wasn't expecting it, had no answer, got clean bowled. And that always struck as something interesting to me, because Dale Steyn was being interviewed around that process in the commentary box and so forth. And, the expectation was, Dale Steyn might have been, teaching him or guiding him about this. But Dale Steyn actually mentioned he was actually thinking there would have been a better strategy for him to follow up with more bounces. And so he actually had very little input in actually advising him about to set that up. So that seems like something where he has some sort of game awareness that you can build on. It's not just the pace at hand. And like you mentioned, he doesn't really move the ball laterally very much. But again, because of the action that he has and sort of the resemblances to somebody like a Wakar, Wakar used to get outswing, a prodigious outswing at times with the new ball even though he didn't concentrate much on it. He was more in his early years as a reverse swing bowler. I could see him developing that skill set to at least have that lethal outswinger, and under somebody who like Dale Steyn, who is guiding him, who had a very good outswing on his own, I could see him developing that wrist position. So there's a lot to like about Umran. But let's move on to a bit more of a tangible thing. What do you think are his chances going forward, both from a domestic IPL standpoint and in an international, T20, ODI, even Test standpoint? So Gurkirat, clearly a lot to like about Umran. And as you mentioned, he's probably only going to get better and better. What do you think are, his chances of progressing from purely an IPL product to an international one? And even in the IPL, what are your chances of him seeing him being, say, even retained or going for a lot of money in the subsequent auction cycles?
See, I think he'll be retained only with SRH. However, if you look at the franchise's history, it won't be a surprise if they let him go. But I saw too many calls about fast tracking him, but I wasn't on board with that. I still think that he's been selected for India a little early. I'd really like him to play, if not 2, then at least 1 season of domestic cricket, because it's one thing to sustain pace for 4 overs in a game, but it's entirely different to sustain it for 15 to 20 overs in a day. Yes. That is where how you manage your workload, how you focus on bowling tighter lines, because I don't think when you're bowling in a first class game, you can bowl all 20 overs with the same intensity and the same speed. You will have to cut it down somewhere, and you will have to learn how to bowl defensive lines or bowl with control or how to bowl when you have to dry up runs, right? So I would ideally want him to play, if not more than at least one full season of Ranji Trophy, and then track his development, because I think as of now it's too early. And also I don't think even if the Indian T20 team has the luxury of drafting him in, because we don't have defensive spinners. In the 11, probably it would be Chahal. Chahal doesn't bowl in the power play, right?
Yeah.
So you can't have another bowler who's only good enough to bowl in the middle overs, right?
Yeah.
And the thing with Indian fast bowlers is that no one bats apart from Shardul, and Shardul, the bowler, isn't very reliable. So I still think it's far too early to draft him in. But I think what it would do is that if he is with the team, he will continue to bowl in the nets, probably improve, because he was the net bowler in the last World T20 as well. So but I think one has to see how he progresses as a fast bowler, especially when he's playing the Ranji Trophy, because the tracks are also very tough for pacers. They don't have a lot, so sometimes it could actually be very, how do you call it? It might even be demotivating to bowl on those tracks, especially the tracks that you get in India. So it's good that he has the pace and he's shown that he has the brains as well. But you have to go through the grind of domestic cricket, because if you don't go, then you also you might even have a trajectory which someone like a Varun Chakravarti has right as of now, because his rise was very different. He hasn't come up the ranks through the conventional ways where he has played a lot of domestic cricket, so he has fitness issues as well. And then when you don't play that much of domestic cricket, so when you are encountered with a different challenge, like how Chakravarti had to encounter the Indian pitches, or the pitches particularly in Maharashtra, he didn't get a chance to bowl in, say, a Kotla, which can sometimes be a slower wicket, or in Chepauk, or probably even in Ahmedabad, where the pitches are slightly sticky. So you sometimes stand to get exposed, right? I fear that might happen with Umran if he's fast tracked far too early, which is why I'm saying that he needs to play one season of domestic cricket for Jammu and Kashmir, where he's playing the Ranji Trophy, he's playing the Vijay Hazare, he's playing. I don't think Syed Mushtaq Ali will be a problem for him, because he'll be able to bully most batters with pace. But he has to play Ranji and Vijay Hazare.
No, fair point. I mean, I will say on my end, I slightly differ from you on this, in that I wouldn't fast track him either into the Indian side, but I do think he should be a more regular feature on the India A circuit, mainly because that'll give him more exposure to bowling.
Yeah, which is what playing first class cricket is. India A tours are not happening, and this is the point which recently MSK Prasad has raised as well in an interview, where he said that to track his development, it is important that he's also sent on India A tours.
Yes, and I think that's very important. I will say, not to belabor the Waqar comparison, but Waqar was also a guy who didn't have a lot of exposure in domestic cricket, and at the time Pakistan's domestic structures weren't great, and so Imran Khan watched him bowling for some random final that just happened to be on the TV, and the story goes that he found him and he was like, this guy's really quick, so you need to fast track him. But what I would say is that I certainly think he needs to bowl more long format cricket. And it's interesting that you brought up that you think that would be like, he would have to cut down on his pace sometimes and so forth. I certainly think that'll be the case on certain tracks. We'll have to adapt and so forth. But I think the converse is also true, right? Sometimes when you actually learn how to bowl quick, I know Umran is quick in bursts right now, but to actually learn how to bowl quick for an extended long period of time, really quick, right? Like somebody like a Waqar did, you actually have to bowl long overs on flat, dead surfaces, and then over time you actually develop your bowling skills, you develop your repeatability, and you get an idea of how to rhythm, and you get a development of rhythm in your action where you can go flat out for long periods. And so I would say the one thing that is also in support of that point is actually the opposite, in that yes, you may have to slow down on certain tracks, but you also actually learn the art of refining your action and bowling
100%.
faster. Yeah,
100%. Because also first class cricket will also bring in another challenge, especially if it's being played in India. That how does he manage to bowl with the old SG ball? We have already had issues where Virat and Ashwin have raised that the ball goes far too soft after the 50th over. That as a bowler, there's nothing to take purchase out of the pitch. Even the spinners are struggling. So that is another thing that he'll experience. Now, if he becomes the kind of bowler who takes the pitch entirely out of the equation, like Akhtar did when he was bowling well with all those Yorkers, we don't know. But what I'm saying is that we still need to see that before we, talk about, playing him in all formats.
Absolutely. But I do think that he has, with all of those things said, a bright future ahead. And the hope is that he develops into a more well-rounded bowler, and hopefully he takes the advice from the people around him and looks at other bowlers in his mold, like a Akhtar, like a Shoaib Akhtar, like a bunch of those bowlers, and gets the sort of advice that he needs for that. But yeah, long story short, bright future ahead. Hope for the best with him and his chances in India colours.